Federal judge in Delaware has dismissed misdemeanor tax charges against Hunter Biden. The decision had been expected following last month's failed plea agreement between federal prosecutors and the president's son. Special counsel David Weiss is expected to refile the charges or bring new ones against Hunter Biden in California or Washington, D.C. With us now, counsel to Hunter Biden attorney Abbe Lowell. Abbe, thank you so much for being with us. What in the world happened? That was a mess. So we're about to get a deal. Suddenly it blows apart. Why?
Well, if you were in court or if you've read the reports, the principal issue, as you could see and hear, was a misunderstanding or disagreement between the two sides as to what the deal covered in terms of future possibilities. And so, Joe, there are three possibilities to why it broke down. The first possibility is that the prosecutors who wrote it, it's their document, didn't understand what they were writing and therefore weren't sure why it would be that we would want a firm commitment that this was the end of the investigation. The second possibility is that they actually did know but misstated to us that they had an agreement. Or the third is that they hoped nobody would understand and that it wouldn't be revealed that that's what they intended. And then they kind of dissembled in the courtroom. So you could pick that. But I can help you answer that three possibilities with the following question. What group of competent attorneys on the defense side would allow their client to plead to a misdemeanor on a Monday, knowing that the government could prosecute their client on a Wednesday for a felony? It would never happen.
So did the prosecutors act in bad faith? And if they did, why?
Well, as I said, you'll have to talk to them. I can give you the theoretical three possibilities. I can tell you that defense attorneys wouldn't do what they think happened. And so now you have to decide. But I don't know what they did. But I do know that there's only three possibilities.
Yeah, so Chairman Comer keeps going after Hunter Biden, and I must say he keeps embarrassing himself time and again. I won't even go through all of the missteps he's made, but I am wondering, have you all considered having Hunter Biden testify in Congress before that committee?
I think that's just premature, but I think as you pointed out before your break and what you just said now, you have to have a serious congressional proceeding in order to consider having somebody like your client come. And there's been nothing serious about this set of proceedings. This is a set of Republican chair people who have done the least the following. They basically started by admitting that the whole point of their proceeding was, to use his phrase, move the political needle. Since then, they've basically said the reason the United States is helping Ukraine because of the bribes that occurred between the two. Then they have said that the reason that the Titan submarine news was suppressed was to cover up for the deal that was going to be announced for Hunter. Marjorie Taylor Greene used an oversight hearing in order to show naked photos of our client. Comer has basically just been bragging that he's the one, to use his phrase, who shoved the plea bargain up the you-know-what of the Justice Department. There have been allegations that there was a whistleblower, which turns out to be, first they said the guy was missing, and then it turns out that he is a fugitive and that he's involved in obstruction and being a foreign agent. With that panoply and laundry list of the things that these members of Congress have done, until they show that they have a serious intent, are operating within the rules, and have a proper legislative purpose, nobody would go before them.
Well, just to add a little meat on the bone there of their so-called informant, that agent of Communist China also tried to smuggle Iranian oil illegally to the Communist Chinese Party. So, yeah, they have a rich cast of characters. I'm curious, they're obsessed with connecting Joe Biden with some of these business deals. Is Devon Archer correct that Joe Biden got on the phone in some of these meetings with Hunter Biden and the business associates overseas?
I think the better answer to that question is everybody, I think, now knows that President Biden speaks to his children and his grandchildren frequently, almost every day in some cases. And I don't think it's unusual, whether it's at a family gathering or perhaps when Hunter was at a business meeting, that would happen. And if there was any conversation, as is Mr. Archer's point, it was like chit-chat friendly, like, how's the weather? So it had nothing to do. Look, one of the things Congress has done with all of their staff and all of their power and all of their gavels is to try to make a connection between the president and any business dealing of a private person called his son. They haven't been able to do that. And back to your other point, one thing people should understand, if they are paying attention, and I hope they are, that in terms of the investigation at the Justice Department, what gets lost are the following two things. First, this was a Republican-started investigation run by a Republican U.S. attorney who had 5 years to look at every transaction that could possibly occur. And at the end of that, decided that the only two proper charges would be a failure to file misdemeanor and a diverted gun charge for when Hunter possessed a gun for 11 days, which was never loaded. And so after 5 years, with no motive to turn the other way to any wrongdoing, that's what they thought was appropriate. People seem to forget the other important point, that when they came to that conclusion, that was after Hunter had already paid his taxes 2 years before the events occurred this last year. And that gets lost in the wash as well.
How many people actually get charged and convicted for these misdemeanor tax charges? Would that have happened if his last name were something other than Biden?
Well, here's the statistics that I think you're raising, which is the following. There are millions, literally millions of Americans who file their taxes late or don't file them at all. And they don't get charged with criminal offenses. They often get the opportunity to fix it by paying a fine and paying interest. There have been those who have said that Hunter Biden has been given a favorable deal by the prosecutors. It is very likely that if his name wasn't Biden, it could have come out different. But I want to say that when it was brought to his attention and it was a way to resolve the issues, Hunter was very willing to accept responsibility for the mistake he made in late filing. It doesn't cover the fact that so many other people would do that and don't get charged criminally. But that doesn't undermine his desire to both put this behind him and to accept proper responsibility. But for those who would say, oh, this was some sort of sweetheart deal, they should really look at the statistics and see how he was charged when others would not be.
And we've been talking this past week about Steve Rattner came on, showed charts. Jerry Kushner ended up getting about $3 billion for his fund. Only 1% of that from American investors, most of it coming from Saudi Arabia. Unprecedented. And of course, we've been drawing the connection to the fact that he worked in the White House, and that's one of the reasons he got that money, perhaps the only reason he got that money. $7 million ain't $3 billion. At the same time, I think Americans are asking, what did Hunter Biden think he was getting that $7 million for? Why would he be getting paid so much money?
All right, well, stop with your $7 million and talk about how many years that Hunter has been in business and what happened to each of those specific years. When you say it that way, people think that somebody just sent him a check for $7 million on April the 1st.
No, but help me out here again. And I'm glad you're here to actually break this down. Obviously, Jared raised his $3 billion very quickly. We have numbers being thrown around. The $7 million is actually not what Comer's saying. Comer has a much higher, much more elevated number. I guess the Washington Post reported it was $7 million. What's the $7 million over, and how many countries did it come from?
Well, OK, so first of all, it's much more complicated than to say it comes from countries. There are joint ventures between American entities and, in one or two occasions, a potential foreign entity to create the possibility of jobs and energy in the United States. That's too complicated to try to explain, but I can answer the question that you asked in the following way. Over the time that he was in business, this is, again, something that people ought to pay attention to. Hunter Biden went to Georgetown University, went to Yale Law School, was on the board of directors of a bank, was on the board of directors of Amtrak, is somebody who went and worked in an international law firm. People seem to forget that this is not the person who's simply out there having people write checks for no reason. He's a capable, educated, experienced person. Now, if Congress wants to start saying, wait, does he get opportunities because his last name is Biden? They should look to themselves. I mean, Senator Joe Manchin's wife is on a commission in West Virginia where Congress had provided an enormous amount of funds. There is Congressperson Boebert, who has a spouse that works in the consulting business. If you start dissecting people who have the ability to use their connections and their name in order to get an opportunity, then okay, but then what's good for the goose, good for the gander? Congress should look at their own. People have been doing this for millennia. Maybe it's not fair to us who don't have the name, but that's what happens. And the most important point is that it's not improper and it's not illegal. And the thing that's different, and you just said it again, is that Hunter Biden has never been in a family business like the Trump kids, and he's never acted as an advisor to the president in the White House, using both of those in order to then conduct business. That's a fundamental difference that also ought to be remembered.
Well, and you talked about members of Congress. Just go back through recent American history with presidents and members of their family. You and I may not think it's right. That doesn't necessarily make it illegal. Counsel for Hunter Biden, Abbe Lowell, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate you being here. Did I miss anything? Anything else that needs to be added?
Well, I think the last thing to say is that you started your segment by pointing out that the judge did what the judge had to do in Delaware, which was to dismiss the 2 misdemeanor tax charges for late filing because there was no what we call venue, meaning that those tax charges can't exist in Delaware unless you agree to it and the agreement broke down. But I think what people then who leave this segment today ought to remember is if the special counsel were to do anything now other than refile those same tax misdemeanors in a jurisdiction that has venue, then people should ask themselves the following question. After 5 years and all the things that were investigated, if anything changes in what happens next, then people should ask, it has to be something other than the facts or the law that has been infecting the process at this point. All right, Abbe Lowell, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate you being here.